Welcome back, Geico Outkick Studios. The awful Joel Klatt joins us now, Fox's lead college football analyst, and we got a lot to get into, but I want to start with this. Indiana, Michael Penix Jr., phenomenal display that he put on Saturday. You guys had an outstanding game. I know that Indiana was down 21 a couple of different times. They finally got the ball back with a chance to try to tie it or maybe go for two at the end. What did you leave with feeling like you had seen? 3 interceptions from Justin Fields, probably his worst game. I think it's probably fair to say as an Ohio State starting quarterback. What's the big takeaway from that game?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great game. They were down 28. I mean, it was 35-7 after the first series of the second half, and I got the feeling that Ohio State just kind of put it in cruise control. And that's the thing about, like, Indiana, in particular Michael Penix. Like, they don't really care the way that it looks, and they're going to continue to fight, and they're going to continue to play well, and they've got some really good players. Penix not only was great, Ty Freifogel was unbelievable. The wide receiver had well over 220 yards. He was terrific in a big matchup against Shaun Wade, which was supposed to be Ohio State's top corner and one of the top corners in the country. And Freifogel just absolutely torched him. Penix is so impressive, and he has been all year. I know that it was probably more of a coming out party for him because, you know, it was a big game. It's a big rating, and I understand that. But he did a similar thing in that last series against Penn State where he had guys hanging all over him and he was making throws. Clay, it's very rare where I see a college quarterback that really impresses me with his anticipation. I get impressed with athleticism all the time, arm strength all the time, you know, all this, and everyone's, you know, all the coaches always talk about he's such a strong leader and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can imagine, right? I hear the exact same thing over and over and over every week from every coach about their quarterback. But when I turn on the tape, I generally don't, in college, see a large amount of anticipation. And this guy throws the ball before the wide receiver's out of his break constantly. And it was something that jumped off the tape to me. I was excited to watch him play, in particular against what I felt like was going to be the best defense that he was going to face all year. And he went out there and played a brilliant game. And I know we're talking about just him, but, like, I will tell you that Ohio State has got to be concerned with their pass defense after what Penix was able to do. I mean, they had no run game whatsoever, and Ohio State still didn't have an answer for their pass game. You know, they ran the ball for negative yards and threw the ball for over 400. So Ohio State's got to be concerned about the back end, and meanwhile, Indiana's got to feel really good about their chances in every game that they're going to play from here on out, even a game against Wisconsin.
That's what I was going to ask you about was going forward. Ohio State gets the win, but if you project, Alabama is incredibly explosable offensively. Nobody can cover Devontae Smith. We know how good Trevor Lawrence is, and now their defense is rolling into shape. I know, but I mean, we know from an offensive playmaker perspective that both Alabama and Clemson have them in spades, and we'll see what happens with Notre Dame. If Florida were to get there, Florida can go up and down the field as well. Is that a statistical aberration from Ohio State, or do you think it's reflective of larger issues?
Well, probably both, because, and here's why it's both. It's because it's still just their fourth game. It's the first time that they're really getting tested, you know, by someone that can really throw it and has great wide receivers on the outside. So that's why it's maybe a little bit of an aberration. But at the same time, you know, this is not the secondary that we saw a year ago, and you've got to be concerned that now Jahan Dotson from Penn State and Ty Freifogel from Indiana have really beat up your best corner if you're Ohio State. You know, Shaun Wade was supposed to be a lockdown guy like Jeff Okudah was a year ago. And when you project forward into – see, when you're here – and here's the dirty secret. Conferences don't really matter anymore, Clay. Like, we talk about them, but let's be really honest. If you're at Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State, you're not – and maybe less so Alabama, but certainly Clemson and Ohio State, you're not recruiting thinking about the other teams in your conference. You're thinking about the other top tiers in college football. You're thinking about the semifinal. You're thinking about the national championship game. So listen, is Ohio State good enough to run away with the Big Ten after this win? Yeah, absolutely. They're going to run away with the Big Ten. They'll probably be in the playoffs. But the problem is both of those schools, Clemson and Alabama, and maybe even Notre Dame as well, and certainly Florida would be in this mix, are totally poised to do exactly what Indiana did. So that's why it's a real cause for concern, because when you project out who do they have to beat in order to achieve their ultimate goal, those teams are going to be able to do and attack them in the exact same fashion that Indiana did on Saturday.
What's up with Penn State?
I have no idea. Listen, I know that some of their best players are not playing. Obviously, Journey Brown had that weird, heart condition. He's not playing at running back. Michael Parsons, probably the best defender in college football. He opts out. That's going to hurt your team. But I don't get it. And here's the thing: is Penn State played really hard last year, in particular on the defensive side, right? Their pass rush, all these, and that was I would say is a staple of James Franklin's team. And now when I turn on and then, I'll watch some of their game film and I'm like, man, I'm not even seeing the effort. I just think that Penn State is caught in one of these scenarios where it's like, hey man, 2020 sucks. This sucks. We're not playing for anything. How many more games are we actually going to get? Do you really want to keep wearing a mask around? And it just starts to snowball. That's why I think you're starting to see teams they're either going way up or way down at this point. At least, and maybe there's a few that you could point to that would be different than this, but I feel like teams are either really achieving or really underachieving, and there's nobody that's just kind of steadily getting better and better throughout the year.
We're talking to Joel Klatt, Fox's lead college football analyst. We were talking about the college football playoff perspective in general. I saw a line, I like to talk gambling. Notre Dame is only around a 4-point favorite over UNC. Now, I think that's going to surprise a lot of people out there because many are already projecting, Notre Dame's going to be undefeated when Clemson comes back into play. Do you think Notre Dame should be afraid of that road game Friday at UNC?
Well, they've got to respect it, certainly, but I think that they're far better than UNC. Notre Dame is not the flashiest team, but they're really good at the line of scrimmage. I mean, really good at the line of scrimmage. And I hate to say this, but it still does come down to that. Even with all the points that are scored in some of these games in the playoffs and in the championship game, it really still does come down to the fact that you've got to win in the trenches. Your offensive line has got to be better than their defensive line. Your defensive line has got to be better than their offensive line. And this is what's fascinating to me about this year's Notre Dame team is that they don't fall in the same category as some of Brian Kelly's previous teams. Clay, in 2012, they went to that national championship game and got just thumped by
Destroyed.
Alabama.
Yes.
Alabama ran the ball for 260.
It was 35-0. It was such a bad blowout, Joel, that the biggest story that many people will remember about that game is that A.J. McCarron's girlfriend became a superstar. That's how much of a blowout it was because they put her on television.
She got Carl's Jr.'s commercial.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
All sorts of stuff.
And she married A.J. McCarron later. But that's the game. That's how big of a blowout it was that they put her on and she was the primary story.
Well, it was that big of a blowout because Alabama could do whatever they wanted at the line of scrimmage. Notre Dame ran the ball for 33 yards, and Alabama ran it for 280. I mean, it was an obscene amount. Then you fast forward to the playoff a couple of years ago. Very similar story with Clemson and Notre Dame. Clemson, over 200 yards rushing. And then Notre Dame only 82, I believe it was, 82 yards rushing in that game. And then you go to this season. And Clemson comes to town, and albeit they didn't have their quarterback, but you know what happened is that Notre Dame just absolutely killed them on the line of scrimmage. Notre Dame ran the ball for well over 200 yards. Meanwhile, Clemson could not run the ball. Etienne was a non-factor. The game plan was really good in terms of taking him out of the game and letting the freshman Uiagalelei kind of have at it. So I think that this Notre Dame team is way better than they have been in previous years. I think they're more suited to play with the big boys. And I think that they're going to beat North Carolina by way more than 4 points. I have no idea why that's a 4-point spread. It doesn't make any sense to me at all.
How much were you rooting for Rutgers to beat Michigan just so you could talk about Greg Schiano winning?
The only team I've ever rooted harder for in college football is my alma mater, the Colorado Buffaloes.
So you were watching that game just desperately hoping like with your Twitter fingers at the ready for Rutgers to win that game.
There's no doubt about it, just because I hate you so much. And, like, it would have been so perfect on a day in which you're tweeting that Vol Nation deserves better than Jeremy Pruitt.
We do deserve better than Jeremy Pruitt.
Yeah, I mean, whatever, but you're in this boat because you put him in this boat.
No, I didn't pick Jeremy Pruitt. I didn't pick Jeremy Pruitt.
You made this bed. You sleep in it, all right? You understand me? Listen, I don't have any ill will towards Michigan. I've been a supporter of Jim Harbaugh. You know that. But, boy, if I could have done anything to help Rutgers win that game for the sole purpose of sending some snarky tweet to you, the loathsome Clay Travis, I would have done it.
I tell you what, my wife, is a Michigan grad, and it was a late game, right? Like late night game or whatever, and so we had the game on, getting ready for bed, and I said, like, I know why you want Michigan to win. I said, but I got to be honest with you. If I turn my notifications on and Rutgers wins this game, it's going to be like bombs over Baghdad. Like my phone is just going to absolutely light up if your alma mater loses this game. And Rutgers missed a field goal that would have won it. And, I mean, look, they were fortunate in the comeback to even get there. But the thing I was going to take away, other than you being able to have ridiculed me if it had happened, even more than you would like to ordinarily, is, I don't know about you, but when I watched Jim Harbaugh on the sideline, I thought to myself, this guy's coming back next year. I know it was just Rutgers, and I know they're just 2-3. Yeah.
I've said that on this show.
We've talked about what's coming next. That's right.
Everybody has said, like, Michigan, that'll change. I don't know about that. I think Jim is happy where he's at. I think his family is happy where they're at. I think that he wants to get it done deep down. Remember now, he played for Bo Schembechler. His dad coached there. Like, he's desperate for that to work. He's not a paycheck guy. Like, I don't think and granted, he's getting paid a ton of money, but he's not there for that check. And I would not be shocked if he's still there next year. I just won't. They have the 8th ranked recruiting class in the country. They've recruited pretty well this last couple of years. Another good recruiting class in 2022. I'm just telling you, like, everybody right now, everyone just thinks that that's such absolutely, it's going to change, and Harbaugh never stays. They're going to have to fire him. I just don't think that that's the case.
What I was getting at is the way he reacted. It was, yes, I know that they beat Rutgers and that they should beat Rutgers. You should never be in a close game with Rutgers if you're Michigan. But like if you're looking at their schedule now, if they beat Penn State and they're favored to beat Penn State this weekend, they get back to 3-3, and you know how college kids can be. For the average adult out there, they're like, oh, it's such a crappy year. They're 3-3. But for the average college kid, like on a week-to-week basis, you get such a variety of different teams that show up. They can feel maybe pretty good about themselves if they get to 3-3.
Yeah, I mean, and they're going to have this quarterback change. I'm interested to see what that does to their offense, because it just wasn't working with Joe Milton. As well as he played against Minnesota, it just was not working over the last couple of weeks. And I'm interested to see what Cade McNamara has. And remember now, a big reason why Dylan McCaffrey transferred, wasn't just that Joe Milton was beating him out, but also Cade McNamara.
Yep.
Right? Like, Dylan was falling to third. Like, they really like Cade. Cade is a guy that battled with Joe. And after he plays, this is so interesting. And I think Georgia fans would fall into this boat. But you're like, well, why haven't we seen this before? Like, why didn't they try to play this card earlier? And I think that that's always odd, too. And I'm sure that's what Georgia fans feel like when they see JT Daniels run out there. And they're like, hold on. We were starting Stetson Bennett over a 5-star JT Daniels that can do that?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing, Kirby? Why, by the way, why does Kirby Smart have just an insane track record of starting the worst of the two quarterbacks?
It is interesting now that when you really break out the decision to not go with Justin Fields, right, and to stick with Jake Fromm.
Jake Fromm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. But, you can also ask, and I was going to get to the Heisman Trophy. This actually is a good segue. If Felipe Franks doesn't break his leg against Kentucky, I'm not sure that Kyle Trask ever plays starting quarterback for the Florida Gators. And so
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, Dan Mullen's a pretty good guy at recognizing quarterback talent, right? But there must be something that one of these guys is able to do in practice that everybody sits there and looks at and says, oh, this guy's clearly the best. I understand, like Felipe Franks, big, strong guy, can throw the ball all over the field. But Kyle Trask may well win the Heisman Trophy this year. And if Felipe Franks doesn't get hurt, Kyle Trask may never start.
You know what's fascinating to me about quarterback, and you got to understand now, I was a walk-on, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I always felt like any scrimmage or team period that we could go live, and I'm not talking about everybody else, I'm including me. I would tell Coach Barnett all the time, like, hey, can we be live? Like, can we be live? And the reason is when a quarterback is never live in practice, it's so easy to overlook a guy that's way better in actual live situations because practicing quarterback is way different than playing quarterback. And I think that you see that distinction only in game settings and in actual live settings and scrimmages. So my entire 4 years, I started for 3 years. And every scrimmage, I would plead with him. I'd be like, can you please make us live? And the reason was all the other quarterbacks looked better than me in practice.
Yeah.
I was like, listen, this is my way to retain the job is operate the offense with a live rush, move the football down the field, and do all the things that are more intangible about, putting the ball in the end zone and moving it down the field. Like I can remember, I got banged up one year, I think it was my junior year or something like that. And I probably could have played, and I wasn't playing very well anyways, but they were like, hey, we're going to start the other guy, the backup. And he went out there for a quarter and a half, and it was just like, it ain't happening, man. And he was a much better practice player than I was. If you just come out and watch 7-on-7, you'd be like, why is Klatt starting over that kid, right? Like, he's so much better. So I think that has a big reason to it. And as we pull back from being full contact and practice across college football, I think that quarterbacks lose the ability to prove why they should be on the field in live situations. And I think that's a big reason why you see a lot of these coaches go with guys that might just look better in practice, but really in the live game situation aren't the best option.
Do you buy into Kyle Trask as being a prohibitive favorite at this point? The odds makers have him as a substantial favorite in the wake of Trevor Lawrence not getting to play in that game. I'm sure you've seen all the controversy about Florida State versus Clemson.
Yeah.
Certainly
yeah.
The situation with the game that you had where it's probably the worst game that Justin Fields has played as an Ohio State starter.
Yeah.
And then Mac Jones
No
wasn't
doubt.
asked to do very much as Alabama just absolutely obliterated Kentucky. Should Kyle Trask, he's got Kentucky this weekend, probably will post good numbers again. Then Tennessee probably will post good numbers again. And then, in theory, that game against LSU, if they actually play it, I would think with that LSU defense, he'd post good numbers again. He's going to have big numbers going into the Alabama game in the SEC championship.
He's going to have to win that game. I don't think that they're going to give him the Heisman Trophy if he has those two losses. When you're going to have an undefeated Alabama at that point with a Mac Jones, or an undefeated Ohio State with Justin Fields, depending on how he plays. But I would have said no, that he wouldn't have been my favorite before this weekend. But after this weekend, after the way that Fields played, I think that Trask is probably the favorite, but I think that it's still a long shot for him just because of that mountain to climb, which is Alabama. Listen, I think here's the way to put it. He's in the driver's seat. I think he controls his own destiny more so than anybody else. If they went out, Kyle Trask is going to win your Heisman Trophy. But I don't know, man. I know that the Alabama defense, at least the pass defense, can be stressed. They can be gotten here and there. But I just think that's going to be a really tough game for a team in Florida that defensively is not going to keep Alabama from scoring 42 points. So we'll see how that goes. But that's where I kind of stand on the Heisman Trophy. I got all sorts of crap from all the RTRs on there because I didn't have Mac Jones in my top 5.
Yes.
And I'm just like, man, he's not. You could make an argument that he's not in the top 5 players on his own offense, right? Like that would just be my deal. Like, yes, Pitts is really good, and Trask might not be the single best player on his own offense, but he's close. He's really close. Justin Fields, clearly the best player on his own offense. Mac Jones, I don't know. I mean, he's not.
Najee Harris and Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith may be the best offensive player in college football, right? I mean, Kyle Pitts is up there. But, I mean, if you looked at the ability when they brought in Bryce Petty and Devontae Smith, they left him in. I mean, and, Waddle's injured or whatever, but the ability of Devontae Smith, nobody can cover him.
No, and so I think that's going to hurt Mac Jones when we get down to it. I think the Heisman's always an interesting deal, man. It really is, and it tends to be like, well, who's the best quarterback of the best team in the country? Yes. And so Trask is going to have that opportunity, and I think his numbers are going to suggest that he should win the Heisman Trophy. But I could see it in the end falling to Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. And remember, I also think this in a weird year. Voters, I don't think, are going to forget the lobbying and the leadership of Lawrence and Fields before the year to even play this season, period. And I think that they'll get some of those sentimental votes outside of just the numbers that they put up. I mean, a big reason why we're playing football, certainly in the Big Ten, is Justin Fields. And I know Trevor Lawrence had a big hand in that as well. From an overall college football standpoint, going back to August.
Good stuff as always, Joel Klatt. We will talk to you next week. But by the way, I'm asking everybody this as we roll through with the guest, or at least trying to remember to. I think I forgot with Todd Furman earlier. If you are drafting at Thanksgiving, only one food, what would be your first round pick?
Well, I can't just have one. Well, is gravy considered a food?
I don't think so. Because I think in order to be considered a food, like you would have to be able to eat it by itself.
Well, I would eat gravy by itself.
Really? Like you would just sit there with a spoon and just, pound gravy?
Well, especially once you put it in the fridge and it turns like Jell-O, absolutely I'll eat gravy with a spoon. There's no doubt about it. I'll go mashed potatoes and gravy as the number one overall pick. And frankly, it's not very close. Anyone that says turkey should be thrown into the river, that's like the dumbest thing of all time. I can get white meat whenever, but when do you get delicious mashed potatoes and gravy? Very rarely. That's the number one pick on Thanksgiving, period.
Pecan pie for me.
I mean, that's not a food, it's a dessert. Gosh, you're such a moron.
It's not a food, that's a dessert is an amazing line.